Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our first set of notes for AP Biology. I'm going to talk wicked fast. You are welcome to try to speed up this video if you like, but you're going to need to take notes really fast. Pause the video as needed so that you can take notes. The first thing that we're going to talk about in our unit on biochemistry is water. Water is incredibly important, and so it ends up being our first topic. Well, why is water so important? It's so ordinary. It turns out, though, that scientists, as they search the universe for life, they are looking for signs of liquid water because they believe all life will need water. We know all life on this planet requires water. We think life, no matter where it forms, will require liquid water. Well, what's so special about water? Let's talk a little bit more about that. First of all, I like this infographic here. It talks about how much water is on this planet. You may have learned that in earth science. 71% of our planet is water. Most of that is in the form of salt water in oceans. There is a small amount of fresh water that's stored in lakes. We have a bunch here in Minnesota. But the real issue is about the water that's inside of us. 79 to 95% of the composition of a cell is actually water. And all the reactions that are taking place that allow me to be talking and moving and doing all the things that I'm doing require water. Water is also one of the few substances, in fact, I can't think of any others, that exist in all three phases, gas, solid, and liquid, at normal terrestrial temperatures. Some of you, if you've taken an astronomy class, may know that Earth is in what we call the Goldilocks zone around the sun, which is just the right distance to allow the water to be in all three states, solid, liquid, and gas. And so we think that any planet that might support life, which is so unlikely in the first place, you're going to learn a lot of reasons why very soon, but that it might have to be in the Goldilocks zone, just like Earth is. All right, so let's talk about what those unique properties of water are. The first thing that I'm going to say is you need to draw this picture. So pause this video as needed. There's 5 water molecules. You should recognize what water looks like from chemistry. What we want to really introduce you to are called the hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds are incredibly weak bonds, and they form because water is polar. Remember that the oxygen atom in red is slightly negative, it's stronger, and so it pulls the electrons close to it. And the hydrogens are weaker, and so they're slightly positive. So the negative oxygen, slightly negative oxygen, is attracted to the slightly positive hydrogens on a different water molecule. We draw them with dotted lines because hydrogen bonds are weak. So make sure that you draw the dotted lines. If you see solid lines, that's a covalent bond. The dotted lines are these weak hydrogen bonds. So what are the unique properties of water? Well, there are so many, and they're due to the fact that water is polar and it has these hydrogen bonds. I'm going to just say these properties right now, and then we'll teach you all about them in just a second. Oxygen slightly, I went over all this already. Okay, so what are some of these properties? Cohesion, adhesion, surface tension, capillarity, high specific heat, evaporative cooling, the fact that ice floats, it's a solid. Why does it float? And the fact that it is a universal solvent. Not quite universal, but close enough. And then finally, the dissociation of water and pH. Acids and bases are dependent on water. So those are all kinds of super important characteristics, and we'll talk about what they are and why they're critical for life. Before we do that, I just want to make a quick note about what are called van der Waals interactions. Van der Waals interactions are another type of very weak bond that we haven't learned about yet. They're even weaker than hydrogen bonds, and they're extremely random. At any given point in time, electrons are traveling around the nucleus of protons and neutrons. At any instant in time, some of the electrons may be aligned closer to another atom's nucleus than at other times. So it says these are a form of weak chemical bond, even weaker than hydrogen bonds. Even molecules that are nonpolar may have, at any given instant, areas that are slightly more negatively or positively charged due to the constant movement of these electrons. It leads to very brief, weak attractions to other atoms or molecules. Van der Waals, named after the scientist who kind of comes up with this concept, Van der Waals interactions only occur when atoms and molecules are super close together. Like hydrogen bonds, when many van der Waals interactions occur simultaneously, they can be powerful. So if you have lots of them that occur at one instant in time, it's a powerful interaction. If they're just interacting randomly, then you're going to have one very, very, very weak bond. Okay, I'm just introducing you to that concept. We're going to go back now to water and the polarity of water. You need to write down these two special characteristics of water. The first one is cohesion, the second one is adhesion, and then we're going to talk about surface tension and capillarity. So, cohesion, like a co-worker, is a similar type of job. Cohesion is when similar types of molecules are attracted to each other. So, in this case, it's when polar molecules attract each other. Water is super, super cohesive, is the word we say. The spider, I should get my picture out of the way here. The spider can walk on the water because the water is attracted to itself. So it creates these really strong, really weak, not strong, really weak bonds between the water molecules that leads to high surface tension. And that's what allows that spider to walk on top. If the hydrogen bonds weren't there, the spider would sink into the water. Okay, adhesion is a similar property. It's when polar molecules are attracted to other polar molecules. So cohesion is when they're attracted to the same molecule. Adhesion is when they're attracted to other polar molecules. So why are they important? Well, let's look at this. Polar water molecules adhere well to other polar surfaces like glass, and I'm going to explain that, or the cell walls, for example, in transpiration, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. Notice that in the drawing here that mercury, that's Hg, is not polar. Notice how different it looks in this diagram. So what you're seeing in this picture are glass tubes, and they're soaking in water or they're soaking in mercury. So the one in water, there's a thick glass tube and a thin glass tube. And then the one in mercury, there's just a medium glass tube that's soaking in the mercury. Okay, so why is the water level higher in the smaller tube of water than the wider one? So this is due to what's called capillary action. Capillary action is due to both the adhesion and the cohesion of the water molecules. So in cohesion, the water molecules are sticking to each other. In adhesion, they're sticking to the glass surface. The glass molecules are polar, and so they have a tendency, the water molecules, because they're attracted to the glass, they have a tendency to creep up the glass. They're also attracted to each other, so they're pulling each other up as they creep up. Eventually, the mass of the water becomes so much that the hydrogen bonds are too weak, and so they can't keep going higher and higher, but they can move a little bit of a distance up. Notice that with the mercury, because it's not a polar molecule, the mercury is not creeping up the glass the way it is with the water. Okay, so now that ties us into this planetary important concept called transpiration. Definitely need to write it down. Transpiration is due to cohesion, adhesion, and capillary activity, all kinds of things mixed together. So let's define transpiration. It is the movement of water upward through trees. Now, I know that most of you understand that trees suck up water from their roots, but I want you to think about how crazy that is. They don't have muscles, they don't have a pump, they don't have a heart. How do they get water to go against gravity? We're going to learn in a second how much water they're moving against gravity. Think about how heavy a gallon of water is. Sequoias move 900 gallons of water per day up. How do they do that if they don't have muscles? So the energy for moving the water up is coming from the sun due to something that we're going to learn about more in our next unit called water potential. I'll just introduce it to you here really quickly. There is less water near the tops of the leaves or needles in a sequoia, there's less water up there in the atmosphere, and there's more water stored in the soil. So that creates this potential gradient: more water down low, less water up high. Water has a tendency to move from high concentration to low concentration, but that's against gravity, and that's problematic. So, what is powering the water to be able to move up? It is the evaporation of any given water molecule from the leaves or needles, and that's powered by the sun. So, as one water molecule is pulled away through evaporation powered by the sun, because of cohesion, it pulls on the next water molecule in this column of water. It gives it a slight tug as it escapes, which gives a slight tug to the next one, which gives a slight tug to the next one. They are also attracted to the walls of the xylem. You see the word xylem cells here. Those are the tubes, like capillary tubes. Those are the tubes inside of the tree or any plant that carry water. And so the water is cohesively attracted to itself. It is also attracted through adhesion to the xylem cells themselves. And so that allows the water evaporates, powered by the sun, and they all pull on each other, and they pull these amazing amounts of water. Fascinatingly, transpiration in environments that have lots of plants changes weather patterns. Here's just a simple quote about farms, and I want you to imagine a rainforest. Some research conducted by the USDA Agricultural Research Service suggests that corn can contribute to between 3,500 and 5,000 gallons of water per acre, so just an acre, to the atmosphere over the course of 1 to 2 days. An acre of corn adds almost 5,000 gallons of water to the air. That creates weather patterns. That creates rain. What happens when we cut down our rainforests? It stops raining. So that makes replanting rainforests really, really tricky. All right, what are some other characteristics of water that we need to know about? Well, here's one: high specific heat. Specific heat, you need to write this down, is defined as how much heat is absorbed or released before you see an increase in or a decrease in temperature. Here are some examples of specific heat. Notice how much higher, like 4 times higher than its closest one, water's specific heat is. What that's showing you, joules per grams degree Celsius, is it requires 4.18 joules of energy to move 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. That's an enormous amount of energy. I want you to imagine boiling a pot of water, and let's just, for argument's sake, let's say your pot of water is made of iron. Iron requires just a tiny amount of heat to get the temperature of iron to increase. So if you first put that pot of water on your burner and turn on the heat, which is going to get hotter, your pot or the water inside? Well, if you touch the pot, you're going to get a terrible burn. If you stick your finger in the water at first, the water won't have changed temperature, even though the pot is steaming hot. And that's because water has such a high specific heat. So why is it so high? That's because of the hydrogen bonds. It takes an enormous amount of energy, even though those bonds are very, very weak. There's so many of the hydrogen bonds that it takes a huge amount of energy to break the hydrogen bonds. Ethanol, iron, they don't have hydrogen bonds, so that energy isn't needed to break them. So why is that important for our planet? Well, remember, our planet is 71% water. Water acts as a temperature buffer. A buffer means that as heat is added, it doesn't change the temperature of our oceans very easily. So it causes the stabilization of temperatures, especially along coastal areas. That are close to the oceans, but across the whole planet. The fact that we have 71% water keeps our temperatures generally stable and then very conducive to life. And then just a quick FYI, you all know about global warming. Our oceans are, of course, heating up, and that's a problem for the entire planet. All right. Another concept, this is the same on the left side as it is on the previous slide. So, another thing that's important about high specific heat is about evaporative cooling. If you look at this person's face, they have liquid water. Now, that sounds funny, but it's not ice and it's not a gas. They have liquid water on their face. Organisms rely on the high heat of vaporization, which is the amount of energy required to turn the liquid into a gas when it evaporates. When it evaporates, the heat gets pulled away from the organism or whatever surface it's on. The heat gets pulled away, and that causes the surface to cool. And so lots and lots of organisms sweat, even your dog on the end of their nose and the pads of their feet, they sweat to cool down. So the hydrogen bonds are broken and heat is released into the environment. Another crazy concept about water is the fact that ice floats, and that may be so what to you, but you have to understand that ice is a solid. It should sink. Generally, solids are more dense than their liquid forms. Take a look at this diagram. You need to understand this diagram. You need to be able to explain this diagram. Okay, so it says solid water is less dense than liquid water. The crystal lattice that forms. So look at how organized the solid water is, the ice. Look how organized it is. Whereas the liquid water is chaotic. The hydrogen bonds in the liquid water, they're constantly breaking and reforming. That's because there's a higher temperature and there's higher kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. So those weak hydrogen bonds in the liquid water are constantly forming and breaking, and that allows the water molecules to be closer together. But as we take heat away, the molecules slow down. And as they slow down, those hydrogen bonds fix them into a fixed lattice, and they are actually further apart from each other than when they're constantly forming and breaking in liquid water. That makes ice less dense, and therefore ice floats. Now, what would happen if ice were more dense? Well, ponds, lakes, and oceans would freeze solid, killing the life below. What happens is that the floating of ice reduces heat loss from the water below the ice. So it's up here, and the water down below can't get colder because the ice on top is insulating it. That allows life to survive underneath our oceans, our frozen oceans, underneath our frozen lakes. All right, next, we talk about water being the universal solvent. Well, it can't dissolve everything, but it can dissolve lots and lots of things because it's polar. It can dissolve ions. Remember, an ion is anything that has a positive or negative charge because it either gained or lost an electron. Polar molecules are attracted to ions. So salt, NaCl, can be dissolved by water. Other polar molecules can be dissolved by water. So anything that has a slight charge, like water does, can be dissolved by water. And even giant things like proteins. You haven't learned about them yet. This unit you will. So that big picture on the left is an example of a protein. And on the surface of the protein, it's such an enormous molecule that it has some areas that are either charged or polar. It's humongous. And so the water molecules are attracted to that, and they help that polar molecule to dissolve. So it's a great solvent. Now we're going to talk about the dissociation of water. It turns out you're going to have an entire unit on pH and acids and bases in chemistry, term 4. But part of biochemistry in AP Biology, we need to understand pH. So I'm giving you a 2-slide introduction to acids and bases. All right, because water is so polar, sometimes it breaks apart. So sometimes one of the hydrogen ions falls off. So it says water can break apart into hydrogen ions and OH. And I better move my pip so that you can see it better. There we go. And OH ions. Hydrogen ions, this is a complicated concept. So hydrogen ions are just a single proton. Let me see if I can move it again to somewhere that's not in our way. There we go. Hydrogen ions are just a single proton. I need you to wrap your brain around that. H plus, so hydrogen is the very first element on the periodic table. All hydrogen is one proton that is being circled by one electron. If we remove the electron, all that's left is one proton. So we can say a hydrogen ion, or we can say proton, and those are synonyms. Sometimes we'll even say a hydronium ion is a synonym. It's not quite. So it says hydrogen ions, once they've broken away from water, immediately react with intact water molecules, so H2O, to form what's called a hydronium ion. So look at the diagram. Notice the H3O plus. It just gained a hydrogen ion and the plus sign that comes with it. And then what's left over is one of these hydroxide ions, the OH. So that's going to become really important when we talk about acids and bases. So in pure water, the concentration of H3O plus and OH is equal. In acids and bases, it's not. So let's talk about that. So the dissociation of water. pH, write this down. pH is a measure of the acidity, and the equation for the pH is the negative log of H3O plus, or negative log of the hydrogen ion concentration or hydronium ion concentration. You can write it either way. The brackets mean concentration of. Now let's remind you really quickly what a log is. If you have a number like 10 to the second power and you take the logarithm of it, the logarithm of 10 to the second power is 2. It's whatever that exponent is. So if you look at this number that I have up here, 1 times 10 to the negative 7, the log of that number is negative 7. Here's where it gets just a teeny bit tricky, but it's not overwhelming. Notice that the equation for pH is the negative log. So it's going to be the inverse of whatever the exponent is. So if I say the negative log of 10 to the 2, 10 to the second power, the negative log is going to be negative 2. But for this number up here, 1 times 10 to the negative 7, that negative 7, the log of that is going to be positive 7. And that's actually important for the pH scale. The concentration, we said that hydronium and hydroxide ions, the concentration is equal in distilled water, pure water. They both have the concentration of 1 times 10 to the negative 7 moles per liter. That's something that doesn't mean anything to you yet, but it will. And so their pH is 7. So if you look on the pH scale, neutral or distilled water has a pH of 7. Acids are lower on the pH scale and bases are higher on the pH scale. It says because pH is based on a negative logarithm, the concentration of hydronium ions is inversely proportional to the pH. What does that mean? You're gonna do this frequently in my class. It means this: thumbs up and thumbs down. As the concentration of hydronium ions or hydrogen ions increases, the pH decreases. So if you look over here in the acids, their pH is low. That means they have lots of hydrogen ions or hydronium ions. For a base, it's the other way around. Their pH is high, so that means they don't have many hydronium ions or hydrogen ions. So definitions, let me get my pip out of the way again here. There we go. So acids donate protons to water, so they have a low pH. So for example, hydrochloric acid is HCl. So it's donating an H plus and a Cl minus. More H pluses means low pH. Bases, on the other hand, have a tendency to suck up the hydrogens and incorporate them. And so that means their hydrogen ions are low, so their pH is high. All right, let me know if you have any questions about pH. We'll have a whole unit on that coming up. A big picture that why you need to understand pH. Let's see if I can move my pip one more time. So it says biological systems can only tolerate a narrow range of pH. For the fish that I have in my classroom, I can't immediately take them from the pet store and dump them into, say, tap water, because the pH is different, and that will kill my fish fairly quickly. So the question is, why does that matter and how does that matter? So it says extreme variations in pH have bad effects at a Life Organization. I don't know what it says under my pip. Anyway, note this extremely important reaction, and please remember the gist of it for the rest of your life. You're going to forget a lot of things about this set of notes in AP Bio, but I'd love for you to remember this one for the rest of your life. Carbon dioxide plus water makes, and you don't need to know H2CO3. You might pick it up accidentally, but that's carbonic acid. That diagram on the left is incredibly important. So what is this reaction showing? Every time that we add fossil fuel carbon dioxide, so when we burn fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide. Every time we do that, the ocean's waves pull carbon dioxide into the oceans. And when the carbon dioxide is mixed with that water, it forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is one of the number one reasons that our coral reefs are dying around the world. And the coral reefs are the foundation of all ecosystems that are marine ecosystems and really foundational for all life on this planet. So not only are the oceans heating up, and that's killing coral reefs, but as we add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, that's acidifying our oceans and causing the coral reefs to die as well. Okay, everybody, that is all we need to know for today. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Let me know if you have any questions.